Once upon a time, in a golden palace full of secrets and swords, a baby girl was born. Her name? Elizabeth, daughter of the mighty King Henry VIII and his new queen, Anne Boleyn. The world expected a prince, but instead, they got her. Anne Boleyn, Elizabeth's mother, was no ordinary woman. She had captured the heart of a king and turned a kingdom upside down. Henry had even broken away from the Pope and the Catholic Church just to marry her. All for love, all for a son. But fate had other plans. Only 3 years after Elizabeth was born, everything changed. Anne was arrested, accused of betrayal, lies, and forbidden love. Whether those charges were true, no one really knows. But the punishment? Death. And just like that, little Elizabeth lost her mother. Her royal title was stripped away. She was no longer a princess, just a child of scandal. A bastard, they called her. Too young to understand, but old enough to feel it. But even at 5 years old, Elizabeth was no ordinary girl. She didn't cry, not in front of others. Instead, she listened. She learned. She watched. Because she knew, if the world wasn't going to give her power, she would take it herself. This was just the beginning. The story of a girl who lost everything, and still found a way to become one of the greatest rulers the world has ever known. She was born a princess, became a bastard, and would rise again, as a queen. The Tower of London was built to keep danger out, and sometimes to keep it in. In the spring of 1554, behind cold stone walls, a prisoner sat alone. Not a thief, not a traitor, a princess. Her name was Elizabeth. She was only 20 years old, half-sister to Queen Mary, and accused of plotting against the crown.
Your supper, milady.
If it's poison, do be kind and tell me now. Saves the suspense.
Just bread and broth, miss.
Even in chains, Elizabeth's tongue was sharp.
Mistress, you shouldn't joke. The queen is watching everything.
Then let her watch. I have nothing to hide except my thoughts.
And your thoughts, milady, are dangerous.
In the tower, walls had ears, and eyes, and loose lips. This wasn't the first time fear knocked at Elizabeth's door. Years ago, as a little girl, she watched her mother Anne Boleyn led away in silence, and never saw her again. Since then, Elizabeth had learned. Words could be weapons, and silence was survival. While others plotted with swords and secrets, Elizabeth studied. Books, people, patterns. She didn't scream. She remembered.
If I am to die, let it be with open eyes and a ready heart. But if I live, I will never be afraid again.
You're to be released, my lady, by royal command.
Alive? How unexpected.
You're free.
No, Cat. Not yet. But one day, truly.
She entered the tower as a suspect, a threat, a shadow. She left as a survivor. They thought the cold stones would silence her. They were wrong. This wasn't her end. This was the beginning of a queen. When most 25-year-olds worry about love, Elizabeth Tudor became Queen of England. No husband. No army of advisors she could fully trust. Just a crown, and a kingdom waiting for her to fail. They said a woman couldn't rule without a man by her side. They said she'd be married in months. Suitors came from every corner of Europe. Princes, dukes, even kings. Each offer came with promises. Gold, alliances, safety. But Elizabeth knew. Every offer came with a price.
Your Majesty, a royal marriage will settle the country.
Or split it in two.
They fear a queen without a king.
Then let them fear me.
She thought about love. She thought about power. And she realized she could never truly have both. To choose a man meant risking her crown. To keep her crown meant standing alone.
I am married to England, and I shall have no other spouse.
Gasps echoed through the court. Some smiled. Some scowled. But one thing was certain. She had chosen her own path. She had no king beside her. No wedding bells. No love story written in roses. But in the end, She became one of the greatest rulers in history. Because Elizabeth didn't choose between the heart and the crown. She chose both, on her own terms. The execution of Queen Mary and England's continued pressure enraged the King of Spain. Once upon a stormy summer in 1588, a fleet like the world had never seen was heading straight for England. They were called the Spanish Armada. 130 giant ships, thousands of soldiers, all sent by King Philip of Spain to destroy Queen Elizabeth. She had no husband, no heir. Many thought she would be afraid, but not Elizabeth.
I may have the body of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king.
She rode out to meet her army on horseback, not hidden in a carriage, not hiding at all. England's navy was smaller, slower, and had fewer cannons. But they had a plan, and they had fire. They lit old ships on fire and sent them into the heart of the Armada. The Spanish panicked. They scattered. Then came the storm. Rain, wind, waves. Nature joined the fight. The proud Armada broke apart. Some sank. Some turned back. Few ever made it home. Elizabeth didn't raise a sword. She didn't fire a cannon. But she led with courage, with words, and with a voice that gave her people hope. And that was more powerful than any fleet. The Spanish Armada came with thunder and left in ruins. England stood strong because its queen stood stronger. In the year 1600, London was alive. Music echoed through the streets, and laughter filled the theaters. At the center of it all stood a queen. Her name was Elizabeth I. Her reign became a time when stories sang and words carried power. It was the age of Shakespeare. Elizabeth believed in the power of words, that a single pen could move hearts more deeply than 1,000 swords. So she protected the storytellers, and the theaters bloomed across the city. Under her rule, England was not just a kingdom. It was a kingdom of ideas. But time, like any performance, must move on. Friends passed away. The music faded. And backstage, silence remained. And now, the Queen's final curtain was drawing near.
I was not the end of something. I was the beginning.
She had no husband, no children, but what she left behind was the light of an era and a future that followed.